If you're not willing to take a chance, how can you expect the world to change? Dr. Denise Koh, a medical professional who also works as a hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, and life coach, is committed to making a difference. She strives to inspire and influence change in people's lives every day. Let's get into it.
I'm Denise Koh. I am a Sinai, which is a Chinese Filipina, born in Saskatchewan, actually. So Canadian-born, second generation. I live here. I am a public health and occupational medicine specialist. I'm also a hypnotherapist, life coach, and author. What else? I'm motivational speaker. Oh yeah, I'm the founder of MedResRx, and also the creator of the MedResRx hypnotherapy app. So I'm doing a lot of things.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And I was formerly the Chief Occupational Medical Officer for the province, which I think I've had a couple of interviews with you from that, as well as a Medical Officer of Health also for the province until quite recently in February.
You've got a lot of titles and a lot of hats that you wear. I don't think we got into this last time, but what got you into hypnotherapy?
That's a crazy story. So, when was that? 2000 and I think 7 or 8-ish. Actually, yeah, around then. Basically, I fell into it. So, as a patient, I was preparing for my Royal College exams. Did not feel ready at all. I was having panic attacks. Yeah, I was not able to study at all. And then it was a late night, like on TV, and I saw it, and it mentioned exam prep. And at the time, I was desperate. So I was like, hey. And then the crazy thing about that was that I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to see what they have here in Manitoba. Looked it up. And the person at the top of the list was actually somebody who I had met at a Tony Robbins, empowerment seminar. So it was kind of one of those ones where it was like, yeah, I have to pursue this. So, she had told me what she did, but at the time, I didn't really register it. And then when I saw it again, it was like it all kind of clicked. And so I started seeing her, and then it was total game changer. Like total game changer. I used it for everything after that point because it was so powerful and it was very quick. And yeah, I passed my exam first try. I used it for IVF. I used it for, a number of big challenges. I used it for burnout. I used it for different health things related to the pregnancies, and then plural because I had more than one pregnancy after the IVF. So relationship stuff, manifesting my soulmate. I actually used it for that. Lots of things. And then I became a hypnotherapist in 2019. And that wasn't a conscious decision. It was more like a butt-covering move because I had arranged something for my hypno, but she couldn't make it. So then I did the training just to kind of be available for that. And then I became a hypno, and then I was sort of like, well, we'll see and try it. And then I started doing hypnotherapy and realized I was really good at it. And then, I had patients that were just raving about it. People were finding out about it and then coming to me. And then that's kind of what set off a chain of...
Interesting. Wow.
So it again was one of those, that's another thing that I'm noticing lately is kind of weird kismet vibe things that are happening where things are so strange to be just a coincidence. So I'm opening up to that right now. And I'm loving that whole thing. That's the fun, that's part of a fun journey, but kind of crazy, but kind of weird, but fun. Yeah.
Hypnotherapy is one of those things I find incredibly fascinating because you'll see two ends of the spectrum, right? Where it's the hypnotists you see on TV and you're like,
stage hypno.
That is so fake. There's no way that's real. And then you hear people like yourself who've go through these stories and it's through hypnotherapy, they're able to overcome various challenges. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those interesting things because it seems to exist on two ends of the spectrum.
Well, I think stage hypno, I think there's still something there. So I don't think that it's fake when there is stage hypno. I just choose to use it for good. And because I'm a medical doctor, you have to, which is fine because it's just something that's like a superpower, like something in my back pocket. I can be like, hey, look what we got here. We can use it for literally everything. It's really quite powerful. And I'm the best example of it because where I was before, I was not at all ready for it. like nobody thought I was going to pass. People were like, "Oh, that's surprising." I had
So
a lot of things going on at the
it really
time.
helped you kind of lock into achieving what you wanted to achieve.
Totally. And so that's, I used it for everything. And it's really great because like it all makes sense. It's not as well supported here in Canada as let's say in the UK, for instance, and other countries. But there is research supporting it for different applications. It's just not as well studied as some of the other
types of therapy.
Yeah, types of therapies or medications or whatnot, any kind of treatments that we use. There's so much there, and it made such a major difference in my life that I can't not rave about it and tell everybody about it. It's like, how can I not, Okay. So, I just we can do a thing. Like, there's so many things.
I mean, it's one of those things that it's always fascinated me, but I've also heard people describe like a lot of these different things. Like, if you're incredibly skeptical and closed off, you're not going to be receptive.
Well, yeah, and that's true. The nice thing about it is really you just relax. Like the process is very pleasant. Mm-hmm. So like if you compare it to you go see a therapist, you talk about all the like trauma.
Yeah.
And then at the end of your like, ding, it's an hour. Oh, well now all my stuff is out and I feel like crap, right?
Yeah, you've unpacked everything and now you got to just pick it off the floor.
Yeah,
and
okay, well, I will leave with now all of this painful stuff. At hypnotherapy, you don't even have to, like you can dig into those things, but it's almost better not to because like we're looking more at focusing what your future state is going to be and really visualizing what that person is, what those feelings are like to be that person, for instance. So you don't really even need to go into that. You can, which is fine.
So it's like you can open up the box and take something else. Like, let's examine this so we can look at what's going here. Whereas sometimes it's like, okay, therapy, what? The box is opened out on the floor.
Well, exactly. And I don't spend a ton of time in the trauma with my patients. I'm more looking at, okay, but what are we getting from that? And how do we change those messages that you've internalized for probably your whole life, which are not really serving you, to how do we change those messages in a way that will serve you better? It's actually kind of simple, very simple, yet people don't use it enough or at all. So, and like everybody can use it for different things. And I have never seen anybody not get some benefit out of it, in the work that I do. Even the ones that are very skeptical, like they won't see as great of gains right away. But usually after you talk for a while, they're like, actually, I've noticed. And the other cool thing, too, is that sometimes what I also notice with my patients is that they might come to me with an issue like, whatever, chronic pain or like addictive behaviors or whatnot. But they'll start having like, my relationship with my partner is like really awesome. Like it's kind of global. And that's that's how I roll. Like that's what I do. I pack my hypno with all sorts of good messaging. So it's always fun to kind of be like, oh, interesting. And then like, it's very satisfying for me to experience those, changes, and they don't expect them, and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, I totally put that in there. Like, they just don't know.
I'll be interested to see more of those like studies and things that you're talking about the benefits of it and how it affects a person. That's incredibly fascinating though. There's
some of it that I've put on on my website and on the app. So there is evidence there. I've found that you can, just because something hasn't been studied or hasn't been written down properly and published doesn't mean that there isn't really good healing that benefits can happen there.
Well, it's like with neurodivergency, like a lot of people are like, it didn't exist before this. It's like, no, people weren't looking for it, diagnosing it, whereas something we're more aware of now. And in terms of hypnotherapy, more people see the benefits of it, the more time they decide, okay, let's take some time to explore this in scientific papers and journals, and then you'll see it more.
And it is one of those things where, and I think we talked a little bit about healthcare and medicine, et cetera. There's not enough healing in healthcare. And I would also say that our system is sick. Like, it's broken, it's sick. There's lots of things wrong with it. And it's not, there are things that are getting better, definitely.
Well, the recent announcement of birth control becoming free in October 1st, that's something that people have been advocating for years.
Yep. And exactly. So there are things that are really great, but there's also things that are system issues that are entrenched and no one's doing anything about it. So there are definitely ones, and I have a knack for finding them, apparently, as just the way my brain works. Yeah, I also have a knack for being very vocal about things and speaking it. And a lot of people don't like to hear it, but it's true. Like, I'm not saying anything that's not true.
Does that tie into your kind of change in life then, finding those things and be like, hey, there's an issue here?
Yeah, and I've done that. That's how I roll. I think maybe that's my thing. I'm extremely honest. I have a hard time not being myself and hiding parts of me, which is not maybe conducive in some parts of medicine and maybe in public service. I don't know. However, at the same time, part and that way about me has had incredible gains in medicine and also in public service. It's just I do things differently. The people I work with individually and closely who get me see that.
Well, we need people like that in a system to shake it up, to not stagnate. Look at what's going on with Boeing, with all the whistleblowers and everything that's been happening. You need people to call it out, because if you just let issues pile up and pile up and pile up, it costs lives.
Exactly. And it became, through my career in medicine, lots of moral injury. And the moral injury was getting worse because I was also getting my voice was getting increasingly pushed down. I kind of understand it from one point of view for an organization that obviously has to look after their optics, but I was being very vocal within the organization and definitely wanting to work within organizations, et cetera, to move things forward. It's just that that's a story. That's part of my book and part of my writings. Current one coming up, and also the one after that too.
Yeah, you had your recent book signing and reading. It was titled "Words from Outrageous Sinai Disruptor."
Yes.
So how'd that go?
It was a lot of fun. Well, and it was great. I ended up actually sort of doing an impromptu reading right before that one because I was at a FAMS event, which was part of the Cultivation Festival. So this was a festival that celebrates the arts, the education, the Filipino community. That was from August 19th to the 25th. So there was a FAMS event, which is the Philippine Association of Medical Students, at the U of M. And we have 6 new med students. So we just had a recent white coat ceremony. Unfortunately, I missed that part of it. But I'm one of the mentors for the Filipino student, for FAMS. And so there was a podium and a mic, and I'm like, I gotta say my stuff. So I ended up speaking at that thing, and there were, students who came to me with tears in their eyes, finally feeling heard and seen for some of the things. There was, and weirdly, there was a white fellow that was listening and cheering and, raving about what I had to say, which was interesting because I was speaking about the white patriarchy. And so I was kind of like, that's an interesting demographic I didn't think would be cheering, but that's awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are individuals who are seeing the challenges of the patriarchy.
Right.
And from my perspective, it is something that doesn't benefit anyone. Deconstructing different things in my life, growing up in a conservative community, being like, okay, what about these aspects? What is it pushing you towards? And for the most part, it's just pushing you to keep that machine going. And it hurts men, and in the process, it hurts other individuals.
Exactly. There's just so many system issues that we could be doing such a better job of all the things. You can tweak things in a way to make it win-win for everybody, but also accelerate that win, make it exponential win kind of thing. I think we as organizations and institutions overall stop ourselves from that level of greatness, which frustrates me to no end because it's we could have easily done this or we could have done that. Yeah. And we stop ourselves because I think many organizations, often medicine, doctors, some governments, et cetera, whatever, institutions, I'll say, often stop themselves because they're trying to protect their positions. And it's like you can't hit that level of genius and greatness if you don't take the kinds of risks that you really probably needed to.
It's not a zero-sum gain in order to reach equality and equity within a society and organization. It's been very interesting looking at the polling data for the Harris campaign and seeing like how different people are voting. When we're looking at like, I think they're exploring like young millennials and Gen Z and seeing how they're voting based on things. So predominantly women are voting for Harris, some young men, but there's also a large percentage of men that are at least in Gen Z and young millennials, that are going to be voting for Trump because they say the Harris campaign or the Democrat Party are not taking their thoughts and feelings to mind, which is very interesting. They feel left behind when everything's being talked about, like feminism, like uplifting women. They feel like they're losing rights from that, whereas it's such a complicated situation because it's like, because one of the things people were saying is like, hey, I can't afford to support a family or anything like that. Right. But it's like that doesn't necessarily tie to like feminism or anything like that. That's about the economic situation.
And that's interesting because I'm a lot more from the perspective that everything's connected. Mm-hmm. We're all connected. If you pull out one issue, and sometimes you have to for like managing the issue, whatnot. Mm-hmm. If you do that at one level and ignore all the other things that are very problematic, you end up with a worse system overall. And this is like a core thing in public health is really, if the more inequities in a population, the unhealthier that whole population is, including the wealthiest and the most successful, whatever the highest demographic is, like socioeconomic demographic, they'll also do more poorly because there is that bigger inequity. So people kind of ignore that, or they just kind of assume, oh, if I protect myself, I will be better off. But if you don't have at least some piece of a lens towards the whole community, you're actually less safe, less all of these other things. Therefore, your health is actually going to be poor. And that's been well studied and supported in whatever research science.
When we're looking at the spaces where these young men are generally getting their information or connecting to, like when it comes to like sports, movies, video games, when we're looking at those sectors in those areas, it's predominantly controlled and like looked after by right-wing spaces. When we're looking at, although he's not relevant anymore, a couple of years ago, Andrew Tate, incredibly popular in terms of like these mental health, wellness things is where, and when we're looking at the Harris campaign and they're talking about, oh, we need to uplift these communities, and just talking from and yes, we need to support those communities and make sure those equities and equalities looked after. But in terms of like, if we're looking at a broader campaign, because they're not explicitly saying, you shouldn't have to say it, but like explicitly saying, hey, we're here to also support white men, they go, oh, okay, what? You're not here for us? And it's like, it's dumb, but it's like, okay, how do you balance that out? Like, you shouldn't have to say for a demographic that's, been predominantly catered to for decades.
It's true. I see both sides of it. And it's interesting because that's part, I think, of some of the stuff that I write about, particularly in the chapter that's coming out in Disrupt 5.0. And that's the one that's Finding Filipina Embodying Isms of Intersectionality. There's kind of it's like a guilt, I think, that I was reading about, particularly with the Asian Canadians, Asian communities, where and it also ties into the model minority idea. So this is where the idea that people who are minorities, particularly Asians, actually do better. What's the word I'm thinking? There's actually a thing that I wrote about. Maybe it's a better way to describe it. Do you mind if I just kind of ramble? But okay. Anyway, how it's tied into what you're saying was around how sometimes things don't need to be said. And I would actually say, well, actually, I kind of get it because things do need to be said. It's just that there's so many things need to be said. Mm-hmm. Sometimes what happens is we do focus on the ones that need the urgent and most important attention first, and rightfully so. However, sometimes we stop at that, which is part of what I saw during the pandemic, which is also what I wrote about in my artificial intelligence in medicine chapter, particularly where it came to like non-Indigenous BIPOC peoples, Manitobans. So that was one of the issues where we kind of stopped, I think, as an organization, and that led to a lot of morbidity and mortality that was really avoidable, and that caused a lot of moral injury to me being in the system and not being able to be vocal enough to change the policies that were being made. And that's part of the thing with model minority, I think, is that there's some descriptions in research, et cetera, about how a lot of Asian Americans, Asian Canadians don't report things, kind of keep things in, feel like it's always like hopeless. We can't be a burden,
we can't be a problem.
Yeah, because of the knowledge that there is truth and reconciliation, really important issues there. A lot of issues related to, Black Lives Matter and the, over-policing situation and actual harms that are happening there. So I read a bit about that, but also how it is important still to recognize those things, because some of the work that we've done needs to still continue on to be more fair and equitable for everyone, because then everybody it'll be a better system for everyone and not just pieces.
Yeah. I definitely think when we're looking at the Democrat Party right now, or the Democrats in their leadoff into the election, is there should be outreach to young men, because the way it's going, like, if you're not going to reach over and be like, hey, we're also here to support you. Like, yes, we want to support all these communities, and there's been a lot of problems with the system, but you're also part of making that difference.
Well, yeah.
You can't change the world if you take, even if people were perpetrators of the issue. Like, if you don't get them involved to make, when we're looking at, like, murder and missing Indigenous women and girls, men are key in addressing that situation. If you cut men out completely, then you're gonna have that othering, and then people's like, okay, well, we're not going to report. There's so many stories. I was watching a comedian talking about, like, hey, if we're not having these conversations regularly, especially with like men, they're gonna hear things or see things and then maybe ignore it instead of reporting it right away. The guy was saying, man, everyone says, oh man, I'm gonna be that person that if someone does something wrong, I'm gonna get involved. I wasn't that person in that situation. I missed the signs, and my other friend got hurt because of it.
It's kind of about the calling in versus calling out thing, where you can call somebody in and it doesn't have to be polarizing. Like, an issue doesn't have to be polarizing if you actually take the time to figure out. We all really, love life, ideally, and like want everybody to do well. It seems
some
like that's
days it's harder to feel that way.
I agree. But, anyway, that's the ideal. And I think we maybe often, and I say we sort of generally, we kind of stop. And sometimes it is easier just to get angry and polarize on an issue and be like, okay, those are enemies. That's,
and the internet and social media just promotes that mentality even more.
Yeah, and the pandemic was the worst for that. Like, just polarizing us. Obviously Trump, he was his own
I think the pandemic was definitely the opening towards a lot of negative mindsets and negative behaviors. And I think we've seen some healing a little bit, but especially with all the news that's happening in the world, it feels like we are just on that pendulum swing sometimes.
Right. It's scary. That was one of the things that really scared me during the pandemic. And I think I also wrote about it in the AI and medicine, was just, like the things that we saw during the pandemic were so, like, things that I assumed were just like, this is a given. I thought, like, Canada believes this. Like, North America, we should all, like, these are rights that we fought for so many years. Why are we even talking about this issue now? Like, that seems really crazy. But then I also know, like, same thing with, for instance, vaccines, right? Like, top 10 public health, successes in history, bar none. And yet now we're almost so, what's the word? We're almost so first world. We don't realize that we forget about all of this history and all the work.
Things have been so easy for so...
Yeah. We're like, I'm going to choose to not do this.
The war in Ukraine, Israel-Palestine, the Congo, like all these places around the world where people are experiencing violence and devastation on an untold level.
Exactly.
It's one of those things that, living in the United States and Canada and a lot of Western nations, it's so easy to forget about the difficulties of the human experiences and the horrors that people go through. We're so isolated from it.
And that's so, I also find that interesting because we're isolated, but we're also not because of like digitization and like everybody can see on a phone or whatever, like really distressing things. And it can be dangerous because we're seeing so much.
Yeah.
That
you
become
get desensitized.
Yeah, desensitized to it and not be angry enough to make change, which is again part of the theme of like you have to be enraged.
And seeing it on a phone is completely different. Like you can be outraged by that, but if you see it over time, because you're not actually getting a physical experience to seeing that, you become numb to it.
And also burnt out. Like I think a lot of people are probably so overwhelmed with such heavy, bad stuff happening in our world that they need to be able to preserve themselves to be able to function. And I see like a lot of, for instance, in like physicians, healthcare workers, et cetera, I think there's a lot that have that moral injury and that frustration, particularly if the organization that they are working for, let's say, or is not outwardly doing more for healing. So yeah, like it's all kind of, it's all tied together.
It's all connected.
Yeah, it has. It's fun. I mean, I shouldn't say it's fun. It's a fun time for me right now to see these things, but be in a different position to potentially do more and better things. That part is exciting for me, and I'm kind of jazzed about that. But it's also a little bit scary and a little bit.
Well, anytime you change a part of your life or try something new, going into untested waters,
right?
It's like, what do I do? And there's always that little voice in your head. What if you fail? What if you fail? Why bother?
Hypno can help with that. But yes, I agree.
And it's all aspects of life. Like I recently got onto a fitness journey, trying to both get stronger and healthier. And, there's a lot of parts that are hard. I am struggling through caffeine withdrawal right now, trying to stop having, because I would drink a Monster energy drink almost every day, which is not good for you
now that you're doing the changes. So, woo.
And it's hard. There are some days where it's like, why do I want to go to the gym today? What's even the point? Mm-hmm. But you got to push yourself through. Like even small things I find. And if you can take those small things and you can start applying them to larger and larger things, and maybe you'll see, but sometimes you will fail. There are sometimes I go to the gym and I have an awful workout. I'm like, everything hurts. I'm not breaking any of my PR or anything like that, but just got to keep going.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's one of the really great things about the hypno is you can, and like you talked about pushing yourself through those negative messages. And it's, we have to do the self-talk, et cetera, but why not like have something that you can just like listen to and actually not even focus on it and kind of even sleep, and then you feel better.
Yeah, taking
you know what I mean? Like,
different
it's like
tools.
So many hacks you can do that are just like, if you know that the messaging is good and you know that it is the things that you want to help you towards this goal, it's just like, it's like secret sauce that you can add to your thing and you get there faster with less effort. So it's I can't rave enough about it, but it's so good.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about your books and like your memoirs from there, because last time we talked about the AI that you were going through, but you have your other ones, the isms of intersectionality in your one book that's coming up. Why don't you tell me a little bit about these and creating these works?
Sure. Well, so the chapter that it's called Finding Filipina, Embodying INSIC, and the isms of intersectionality. That's my chapter and my memoir that's going to be published in the Disrupt 5.0 or 5.0 book, which is part of FWN. So FWN is the Foundation of Filipino Women's Network, which is where I got the most influential Filipino in the world award for the innovator and thought leader category. This is the 5th book. There was already 4 other ones, and these are the stories about like leading and succeeding, some of the challenges memoir chapters from other awardees. So this year, it's going to be launching in Australia. So,
Ooh.
yeah, I know I'm very excited about that. October 31st. There's 4 of us Filipina Canadians that are authors in this book. Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to be writing something for Canadian Filipino Net to sort of celebrate this, because it's also the 75th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Canada and the Philippines this year.
Wow.
So it's actually a really big thing. I was honored to be one of the faces of migration. So I did a little film thing, and I did a profile thing of some of the work that I've done. It's really great to and really timely to be celebrating, these awesome Filipina Canadians, doing great things. And yeah, they're from, there's 4 of us. There's 2 in Ontario, there's myself, and there's 1 in BC.
Well,
so very
the
excited about
Filipino
that.
community is really becoming a cornerstone of Canadian culture.
Yeah.
Like Manitoba, massively fast-growing community, and so many lovely and amazing people. My partner, Filipino, love connecting and learning about the Filipino culture, Filipino families. So much delicious food.
So much. Yes, so much. And I'm learning too, because I was born in Canada. So I'm still learning different dishes that I'm like, I need to be making that thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm starting on some things, and other things I've got down pretty good. But yeah, I actually write a lot about that. And that's part of the things that I did when I first moved to Manitoba, when I was in the public health residency program, public health and preventive medicine. I became very involved with the Filipino community. I wrote for the Filipino Journal. I became part of the PCCM, which is the Philippine Canadian Center of Manitoba. I became the chair for, at the time we had an organization called the MIAC, which is the Manitoba Ethnocultural Advisory and Advocacy Council. So that was a council that advocated for the ethnocultural communities in Manitoba. And unfortunately, that's no longer an organization, but I was part of that too. And then I also did my Master of Public Health looking at Filipino doctors migrating, settling, and getting their licensure in Canada, which is interesting because that was in early 2008-ish. And a lot of the things have not changed since then. So lots of problems with licensure. I also wrote and studied about Filipina care workers. Very big problem there with brain drain and care drain imbalances with the Philippines. So I talk about that quite a bit more in this chapter, this current chapter that's going to be published, and which I did some readings on this past weekend. So lots of things that we do and we accept, but yet we're not, it's not equitable enough. And there's definitely an imbalance there between the 2 countries, and we could be doing more and structuring things more in the system when we're taking the care workers, really. There's so many more things that we can do to make it more equitable, because we really do rely on, well, actually, I read it here. We rely on the work and care of Filipinas as a society, yet they are more likely to be overlooked, undervalued, abused, and first to get sick. So that's something I spoke about in the Independence Ball last year.
Well, I think that's for most industries, not just the medical. A lot of the people who are core to ensuring different industries succeed and thrive are the ones that are most often taken advantage of or thrown temporary foreign workers.
Exactly.
Coming in to work farmlands. We're seeing in the United States, Florida.
That's what I did during the pandemic.
They blocked a bunch of migrant workers, and now they have no one to work the fields. And it's you need people to work those industries, but you also need to take care of those people in those industries.
Exactly. And that's that's why in the pandemic, I was the public health advisor for food processing. And so if you remember, in Canada, not just in Canada, also in North America and other countries, food processing was very, very high risk for, COVID, major
so many different outbreaks between those people.
Yeah, and so there's so many things there, so many risks. And so I saw a lot of that. And it's also a very racialized worker group too. So that was another piece of what I was doing during the pandemic and a number of things that I implemented that, Manitoba didn't have the level of outbreaks and shutdowns that the others didn't. And that's because we're one of the few provinces that had a COMO. I busted and I did a lot of innovative stuff during the pandemic. I'm very proud of.
And it's so important. And when, talking about factory and food processing, when we're looking at meat processing or slaughterhouses, predominantly racialized individuals working there and, going there, working hard hours, and especially in an incredibly grueling and emotionally taxing situation. The amount of killing that many animals in a row takes a toll on you.
Oh, totally.
For anyone who's a farmer, you talk with them enough, it's even if it is necessary, and there are, of course, humane ways to deal with it. I'm not anti-meat or anything, but it's looking at the industry as a whole, there's a lot of things that need to change. People are suffering in their mental health. They get incredibly depressed and isolated and separated from things because there's only so much death a person can handle, regardless whether it's people's deaths or animal deaths.
Yeah, and interestingly, the work that I did during the pandemic, often you'll look at that and think, oh, well, this is the employer's fault, and then just kind of do that polarization thing of workers versus employers, which, there may be things, but some of the ones that I really worked with, the ones I worked the most closely with, were actually excellent. They were very progressive about it. And so a lot of it is because that's the bottom dollar. You have to, keep the industry afloat. So that part was really interesting, but there are definitely a lot of system issues there. And, there are probably some employers that maybe cut corners, et cetera, and those kinds of things. And we try to do what we can, or we try. I'll say we tried because that was in the past. But, I tried to do some work related to those pieces. But it is a very interesting industry. And there are definitely a lot of things in the system, not necessarily all under the employer's control, but that do increase the risk to these worker groups and, Filipino workers overall. So, and exactly what you were saying about migrant workers that are working on the farm. That was another one of my, that was one of my babies as well during the pandemic. So a lot, so much there that we can really learn from and do better in. Sometimes they're at the higher system level where things can be changed to make it sort of more equitable and better for everyone. So those are the kinds of things that I'm more setting my sights to.
And it ties back to when you're saying that when one group is suffering, it causes the entire system to suffer. If we ensure the health, both mental and physical, of workers, making sure, they're being paid for their labor, people are happier. They're
more productive.
They spend more money within the economy, and more people are working, more people are happy. They're going out. Not as many people are relying on healthcare then. That helps alleviate some of the pressures.
Well, and that's also another dynamic too, which, I tried to work on some of these issues when I was in my previous roles, but we're sort of a weird organization and society where we have so much reliance on our healthcare workers to uphold the health of everybody, yet we treat them so poorly. And there needs to be more work to uplift the workers within a system that we rely on. It makes total sense, but yet we're not doing that.
It was so interesting watching, at the beginning of the pandemic, our healthcare workers, they're God's chosen, essentially. They've helped us so much. And then by the end, it's who even cares? It was just such a quick drop. And, we're not seeing people going out and being oh, here's cookies for our healthcare workers, our nurses, our aides, and the other people working within the healthcare system. We don't see that. We're not hearing that conversation anymore. It flipped like that so quick.
It did. And I think a lot of it was some of the rhetoric and some of the damaging stuff that some leaders, et cetera, were saying that were just that's not even a thing. So those things were also very, the misinformation, the conspiracy theories, et cetera. Some of those things were very problematic and really didn't help that. I mean, I don't think that was the only thing. I mean, I think there's so many things that we could be doing, like I guess governments and as organizations to just like do a better job of, treating our healthcare workers and with that like protections, et cetera, in a way that's not, I'm going to mandate you to do these things, but I'm going to like treat you better so that you want to do those things kind of thing. Like it's a different thing. Like
the carrot instead of the stick sort of situation.
Yeah, exactly. I think we talked about that last time, didn't we?
Probably.
Probably. You're right.
The book's launching soon in Australia. But what's next? I know you also mentioned that, you had a comedy stand-up routine planned or something like that?
Yes, I did. Unfortunately, that one was postponed. So they're like legit, like Filipino and Asian comics, local. And then there was me, who's kind of added on there. That unfortunately got postponed, so that's still in the planning and in the works. But I did pull out some stuff from the vault for the event on, the reading thing that I did, the Outrageous Sinai. So that part was actually a lot of fun and had lots of laughs there. I'm very, very vocal, and I tell it like it is, and some strong language, but it was good. It was fun. Nothing, people can't handle, or hopefully not. So I've always loved to write. Actually, when it was either medicine or writing for me, like in the very beginning, like out of high school kind of thing. Yeah. And so that's just a part of me. And I'm also seeing how funny some of the things in my life are, and so crazy, strange, like some of the stories that it's just like, you can't make that up. Yeah. You gotta like take that on the road and share it with people because there's good messages there. There's healing there. Even if some stuff is traumatic, some things are, difficult, but it's good. It's good because, I'm doing great. Like
amazing.
So that's some of the funny stuff that I'm doing and I'm working on. I've always loved like stand-up comedy. That's sort of the thing that I do when I like binge watch shows. Yeah. I love to laugh. It's so good. It feels good. It's healing. Everybody should be laughing. And there's just so much really great things to talk about right now, right? Like there's so many issues that are just like no one's talking about it, or no one's talking about it in a way that's actually looking at changing things to make it better. So, comedy really is a way to maybe help with some people get to that point. Yeah. So a lot of people are like, oh, there's trauma there. I don't want to talk about it. It's always going to be that way. And there's sort of that's kind of like what I think a lot of people have done for a long time. A lot of organizations have done. And so this is another approach that I'm using, to move some issues forward and get people to look at.
Oh, I'm really excited to hear when this all works out and this comedy routine and everything actually comes to fruition.
Pretty soon, I'm hoping. I'm still kind of working on the different things. Yeah, no, I think it will be. It's a little bit difficult getting that number of comedians together, but it's not impossible. Like for a cause, let's do it. So, and I'm sort of also moving into planning events, different kinds of retreats and healing group sessions and things like that. I'm doing more things related to the hypno, but for larger groups of people. I'm doing a lot more collaborations, more publishing things. And then, another thing is that I'm also advocating at a higher level too. So I'm still using my sort of medical systemic thinking brain for things as well. So I'm doing a lot of things. A lot of things, but so many good things. So I'm very excited.
So if someone has been intrigued by this conversation and wants to find out more about yourself or your practice, where can they go?
I'd say for the app, actually probably the easiest one is my website, which is www.drdenisekoh.com. So DRDNISE Koh, K-O-H, sorry, .com. I had to think about that.
What even is my name?
What is my name? So many things. But drdenisekoh.com should have most of the things in there. And you can find me.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.